Hello everyone, my name is Elle and I'm the host of the Mage system, and today we're going to be talking about why the DSM-5 criteria for anorexia nervosa needs to change. So, hi. Yes, trigger warning, this video will feature numbers and BMI numbers, and that is on purpose, and they kind of have to be in here because it's part of the subject of the video. So honestly, if you have a restrictive eating disorder and you have a competitive bone in your body about it, don't watch this because that's kind of the backbone of this video about why the criteria shouldn't be the way that it is. So we're just going to get into it. Well, first, I actually have to tell you why my opinion matters. So I am a former anorexic and bulimic. I've gone into a treatment facility for it and met several other people with the same problems and gotten to know them and their experiences very deeply. I've also been a member of a pro board for a while. It's not as scary as it sounds. It's not like people actually actively rooting like some have you believe. It's pretty chill, but in that environment, I have seen other people's experiences as well. And also, for what it's worth, I do have a meager, whichever one of those words is the correct one, associate's degree in psychology, and I am a certified peer recovery support specialist. So I know a little bit, and also I just have a special interest in this stuff. So let's jump into it by reading you the criteria for anorexia. Okay, again, now is your last chance to click off the video if you are struggling with this and you don't want to be triggered. Just don't watch this, please. I know you want to, but don't do it. I'm serious. First, I'm just going to read you the criteria without any judgment, and then we will judge it. Nervosa diagnostic criteria. A. Restriction of energy intake relative to requirements leading to a significantly low body weight in the context of age, sex, developmental trajectory, and physical health. Significantly low weight is defined as a weight that is less than minimally normal, or for children and adolescents, less than minimally expected. B. Intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat, or persistent behavior that interferes with weight gain even though at a significantly low weight. C. Disturbance in the way in which one's body weight or shape is experienced, undue influence of body weight or shape on self-evaluation, or persistent lack of recognition of the seriousness of the current low body weight. And down here we just have a coding note which says that the ICD-9 didn't have different subtypes of this nature for anorexia, but the ICD-10 code depends on the subtype. So each mental disorder in the DSM has a special code, and the code is different depending on what the subtype is. So there are two for anorexia, and that is restricting type. During the last 3 months, the individual has not engaged in recurrent episodes of binge behavior, i.e. self-induced vomiting, or the misuse of laxatives, diuretics, or enemas. The subtype describes presentations in which weight loss is accompanied primarily through dieting, fasting, and or excessive exercise. And then there's the binging type. During the last 3 months, the individual has engaged in recurrent episodes of binge eating or behavior, i.e. self-induced vomiting, or the misuse of laxatives, diuretics, or enemas. And then there's the specifications of whether it's in partial remission or in full remission. And then there is the specifications of severity. Specify current severity. The minimum level of severity is based for adults on current body mass index, BMI. Mild, BMI greater than or equal to 17 kilograms/meters squared. I think that is... I don't think I need to read the unit. Moderate, BMI 16 to 16.99. Severe, BMI 15 to 15.99. Extreme, BMI lower than 15. Okay, now I'm going to break down each issue that I have with this. If you have seen any of my videos pertaining to EDs before, you already probably know some of what I'm going to say. But let's just get into it. So, first starting with A, restriction of energy intake relative to requirements, leading to a significantly low body weight in the context of age, say sex, developmental trajectory, and physical health. And, right, so we're coming right up. I changed locations? No, you did. You literally did. I saw you. Okay, whatever. Anyways, so yeah, we're just getting right out the gate with the weight issue. Okay, this wouldn't be a Mage System video if there wasn't an introjection. Okay, so in the video from here on out, there's going to be a lot of cuts that are a little bit strange. I could explain to you why that is, but it would take too long. So, I guess just sorry. I hope it's not too distracting. Okay, what do you call an anorexic that hasn't reached that low weight yet? Anybody that is fully aware of the nature of EDs and has 2 brain cells should know that it's kind of cruel to put a threshold on what qualifies you as being sick enough to have this disorder that is notorious for feeling like you have to be really unhealthy before you can be sick enough physically. You know that in the old DSMs, part of the criteria was also that you can't have had menstruated in the last so many months, which is kind of a crazy thing to include in the criteria, right? Because you can, from what I've gathered, you can be a very, very dangerous weight and still menstruate, and you can have lost your period at a very high weight. So it's not necessarily like that's not necessarily a one size fits all scenario, and everybody's body works very differently. Yeah, that's not part of the criteria anymore, but I think that maybe since this is a mental illness, we should be focusing more on the mental aspect of it since it's not a physical illness. I understand in terms of, noting the treatment protocol or just including weights as an aspect of it, because yes, weight does play a factor in terms of how you would treat it at a residential facility, right? But as part of the criteria, I think that it is just not productive, because someone can be doing the same exact behaviors and have the same exact mindset at a different weight. And what is psychology? And what are mental disorders? They are a pattern of behavior, thinking processes, and feelings. They are not what you look like. That is not a part of this. So we have criteria B, which is intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat, or persistent behavior that interferes with weight gain, even though you're already at a significantly low weight. So yeah, I would say this is decently valid. I would say that's pretty par for the course. May not have an intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat. I've talked to people with this disorder that just do it because it's just a form of self-punishment. They don't really care about how they look. They just don't want to eat because they feel like they deserve that, right? They still have the illness. However, it says or persistent behavior that interferes with weight gain. So it's kind of a and or scenario there. Criteria C is disturbance in the way in which one's body weight or shape is experienced, undue influence of body weight or shape on self-evaluation, or a persistent lack of recognition of the seriousness of the current low weight. Again, there's ors here, and that is what I like, is that it is saying you don't have to have all of these things. You can just have one of them, whether that is disturbance in the way you view your body or your weight playing way too big of a role in your self-worth, or just lack of recognition of the seriousness of your condition, right? I think that's decently fair to say that people have a stereotype of anorexia that it always comes in combination with body dysmorphia, to where everybody who's at an extremely low weight, who has very dangerous low weights, they think that they look fat in the mirror. And I'm here to tell you that that is a very much an overgeneralization that is not always true. I will tell you from being on pro ana forums that the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time even, that someone is a really low weight, they know. They know. There is a scale, and we know that that is definitely a very low weight. Now, it may be like fat by your standards, but you were aware that you're not like actually fat, like by society's standards. I think that people don't realize that because they couldn't fathom how someone would want to be that low of a weight. So they think that, well, they must have no idea what they look like. When the truth is, a lot of the time they do know what they look like, they just want to look like that. I do suppose that there was that case that I mentioned earlier. This was someone I met in the ED facility that only used it as a form of self punishment, and it wasn't about weight at all. So I guess that wouldn't fit in here. So maybe it's not. But I do think that that is a maybe a relatively rare situation. I mean, a lot of us do it to punish ourselves, but most of us also care about the weight. So I would say it's a relatively rare scenario where there's no care about the weight or your body at all. But it is pretty interesting. Period isn't like horrible, right? Now, I don't have a ton to say about the restricting type and the binging subtype, other than just if some of you weren't aware, if you have this disorder and you binge eat and you make up for it by either fasting or over exercising, that would be considered binging. And I feel like that's not something a lot of people think about or know. They just think of it as throwing up and laxatives. They don't really consider other things. So, yeah. And then I also wanted to say that if you are under the impression that the misuse of laxatives or diuretics or enemas that they list here, even though I don't think enemas are like the most common form of laxatives are fine. I feel like enemas are like something that you use whenever like maybe maybe I won't get into this right now. But if you didn't know, laxatives and diuretics do not make you lose weight. They just don't, at least not real weight. They're not going to burn any fat. They're not like the form of self-induced vomiting, but it's just on the other end. That's not how it works. Like, it is just going to dehydrate you and make you lose like water weight. Or it's just going to make everything void out quicker than it would have before. So you're just, if you were ever thinking about doing that or you are doing that, it's not working. Here is the real meat and potatoes here, and that is the BMI scale. Specification of how severe it is. So this goes purely by how much you weigh, which is crazy. Is that how you diagnose binge eating disorder too? Are you like, oh, you can't have binge eating disorder if you're not fat? No, that's not how it fucking works. What the fuck? You can't have trichotillomania unless you have no hair. Gender dysphoria unless you've had top surgery. Say that if you are not below a BMI of 17, which is a quite low BMI, that your anorexia is just mild, is pretty like crazy and insulting, because the nature, very commonly, the nature of anorexia is competitiveness. If you have a friend that's skinnier than you, you feel really jealous. If you feel like you don't, if your doctor tells you that you're not thin enough to be considered anorexia, you feel like terrible. And there is a extremely pervasive attitude amongst people with this disorder that they have to be sick enough before they get help. Otherwise, they're not a real anorexic and they won't be taken seriously. This isn't just something that happens sometimes. This is an extremely common mindset where most people that are aware they have this illness feel that way. It is an extremely competitive illness. By saying that you have to be this very dangerous low weight to even not have mild anorexia is a recipe for setting people up to cause much further damage to their health in order to go on the pursuit of feeling sick enough to receive treatment for their issue. Like, would you wait to diagnose like a terminal illness, like a physical illness, until it was in a later stage? Would you do that? No, because you want to treat it as fast as possible before it gets worse. So doing this is an incredibly harmful criteria for it. And yeah, the way I think about anorexia is I do understand that there is somewhat of a distinguishment between, is distinguishment a word? Between people that want to just be thinner than they are, not any thinner than movie star skinny, and they're just going about it in a like terrible, torturous way for their body. Probably do have a lot of self hatred going on there and that kind of thing. I think you could make a distinguishment between that kind of group and the group that actually wants to look emaciated. See how a distinction could be made there. But I don't think you should actually have to reach that weight to be considered like that. But honestly, mostly, I think it should be based off of your behaviors and the way you feel. So I don't think I think most of all, it should be behaved off of how much your thought processes are causing you distress and how they are reflecting in your behaviors and how much harm you are doing to yourself, which does not necessarily have to have anything to do with your weight. You can be you can be fasting for days on end, and then you could binge all the weight back over a few days, and thus you're not going to lose any weight. However, those behaviors are extremely dangerous and just as dangerous and severe as somebody that is actually their behaviors are resulting in them getting to a very low weight. You know, like the behaviors are still just as dangerous. You just can't see them physically. Or you don't know if somebody was an obese BMI before and then they starved their way down to a normal weight in a very short period of time, but you can't diagnose with because blah blah blah. When in reality, that behavior is just as severe as somebody who happened to be at a little bit of a lower weight whenever they started. However, if we are going to make that distinction, then I think that that's where my proposal is that you base the severity categories not off of weight, but off of what actually makes mental disorders challenging for people. Ever thought about that? Bacteria is just so like old-fashioned and sensationalistic. There are so many misconceptions about this disorder that they've even ended up in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, like the one place where the information should be right. It get me thinking about a lot of the misconceptions even in professional materials, and I got my old abnormal psychology textbook and I'm looking at it now. So I've got my old textbook about abnormal psychology for Okay, so I've got my old college abnormal psychology textbook, and I have the section about anorexia here, and I'm just going to read you some different excerpts from it that are really interesting. Also, the copyright on this says 2019, so this is from 2019. So the first sentence about the anorexia section says, the condition now diagnosed as anorexia has been recognized for more than 100 years. It appears to have been exceedingly rare until the mid-20th century when its incidence increased, particularly among young females in Western industrialized countries. So this is quite interesting because from what I would have thought this would be something that had existed before, just because it just kind of seems like, as weird as this sounds, like kind of like a no-brainer way of coping with distress, but apparently it's pretty new. And also about it sprouting up first among young female people in westernized countries, I think, or Western industrialized. I think that I remember hearing that it started in America or Europe or something like that, or both, and then it reached Asia. So I suppose it is sort of a thing that it has become a cultural thing, which is pretty interesting. This is how the textbook describes the criteria for anorexia. Nervosa, as currently defined in the DSM, involves three main features: restricted calorie intake insufficient to maintain normal body weight, intense fear of gaining weight, and a disturbance in the perception of body size. The fear of weight gain and the inaccurate perception that one's body is too fat result in behaviors to prevent weight gain, even though the individual may already be emaciated. Two eating patterns are characteristic of those with nervosa. In the restricting type, the individual diets, fasts, or exercises excessively so that the intake of food is inadequate to maintain current weight. In the less common purging type, the individual regularly consumes food, often in large quantities, but then compensates by induced vomiting or by misuse of laxatives, enemas, or diuretics to produce weight loss. Again, with the enema thing, most often, weight loss is achieved by severe restriction in diet. As certain food items are restricted in the person's diet, the range of acceptable foods can become very narrow. For example, sometimes only a few leaves of lettuce make up the daily menu. That just sounds so old fashioned. Oh my gosh. That makes it sound like we're only eating a few leaves of lettuce every day. Now, I'm sure there has been somebody who has done that in the history of forever, but that's typically not how it works. Yeah, maybe you've done that like a day or a few days, but not like in a row. Like obviously there are days where people fast and they don't eat at all, so it wouldn't be out of the realm. But to like you're making it sound like they do that every day, which would just be you would just die. Like you would die if you did that every day. Like that is like basically eating nothing. Like I don't know why people have this misconception about it that we either just don't eat or we only eat lettuce. Like no. There are plenty of what's called junkorexic, which is where you just eat junk food, but you just don't eat a lot of it. So, like a lot of the time, it's meticulously planned out what is going to be eaten, and I don't know why people think it's so little of things. Like it's not. I don't even know where I was going with that, but you know what I mean. True and common that the range of acceptable foods can become low. Those things are called safe foods. Section reads, however, the strict control of eating and the achievement of continued weight loss are considered to be personal accomplishments and a source of pride for the individual with anorexia. This is true. And this, I mean, maybe not for everyone, of course. Not everyone is a monolith, but typically it is true that it is a source of self-esteem for people, and it is a very sad source of self-esteem, but it is. And yeah, I think that the addiction to anorexia is partially an addiction to dopamine, and that is the dopamine of feeling like you've lost weight, feeling like you didn't eat very much that day. It is a hit of dopamine, and it is surprisingly very strong. And at the end of the day, it is about control. It is about saying, look what I am able to do. It's like going on the most evil, dangerous, like, strike you can think of. And the strike is against nothing productive, I suppose. But you feel like, you know what I mean? Like how people feel control whenever they shoot school, but instead you're just shooting up your own body. I don't know. I hope that doesn't come off a weird way, but you know what I mean? Tend to view themselves in mirrors frequently, scanning for parts of their body they feel are too heavy or fat in appearance. Yes, of course. This is called body checking. Not necessarily just to scan what parts they feel aren't to their satisfactory. It can also be scanning the parts that are to their satisfactory. Because again, doing that and seeing that is a dopamine hit again. So it is another, you know, confirmation that you're doing the right thing and it makes you feel better. So, course is highly variable, and many who begin with the restricting type of the disorder shift to the binging type of the disorder. This is often true. I would say that a large part of the people that are long-term anorexics resort to bulimia, and I'm sure you can imagine why. A variety of physical disruptions consequent on starvation are evident in those with anorexia. Menstruation often ceases or is delayed in prepubertal females. So there's the what we were talking about earlier about amenorrhea used to be in there. Here it is. Here is what the criteria used to be. As in the DSM-4 diagnosis related to cessation of menstruation for at least 3 consecutive menstrual cycles. However, amenorrhea is no longer listed in the diagnostic criteria for the disorders. There may be intolerance to cold, loss of strength, abdominal pain, constipation, and heart irregularities. Mortality from anorexia appears to be higher than that for most mental disorders, in part because suicide is elevated among anorexia patients as well as in those with other disorders, especially if behavior is present. So, yeah, one of the reasons why the mortality rate for anorexia is higher is because of suicide. Suicide can be pretty common in these disorders. So, that is just worth noting. And on that dark note, there is a lot more that I've highlighted here in this textbook that is really interesting. It only gets more interesting from here about the stuff that they're saying. But I don't want to make this video too long, so I think I'm going to make a sort of part 2 thing where I go over the rest of this because I would like to talk about this. So, yeah, if any of you are struggling out there with this, first of all, I hope you didn't watch this video, but you did because you're watching this right now. But, yeah, you guys take care. You guys are great. Never let any medical professional or person at all tell you that your struggles are not bad enough for any reason. Don't let them do it. Tell them right to their face that they're fucking wrong. Been in this body your whole life. You're fighting it out, man. And I hope that you get what you deserve in this life sooner rather than later. And lastly, don't let that character development get too much in your head. You're worth it, man. Thank you for watching.